Hey everybody, it is 2:01 p.m. Saturday, 12th month, the third day, December the 3rd, 2022nd year since the beginning of the Common Era, apparently. But really, I can only go back to 1986. Everything before that, I'm taking people's word for. And really, a lot of the stuff that happened in 86 is pretty fuzzy for me. Anyway, um, it's the third day in a row that I have felt like recording a YouTube video. So things are going according to plan. That's fantastic. What have I done today? I got up and I meditated for an hour, which is great. Um, it was good. Went for a little run. Oh man, I hate treadmills so much. I can't. I guess they make for like what I'm holding treadmills in reserve for is a depression exercise. Um, but I've always thought like I haven't run on a treadmill in years. I used to do it out of necessity when I was in high school. I mean, not complete necessity, but like Northwest Indiana in the winter, wrestling season. Got to stay in shape. It's 10 degrees outside, snow up to your knees. You know, you, you really need snow boots for this. Not ideal for running. It's a lot better to just run on the treadmill. And I run on the treadmill sometimes when I was in the army. Again, somewhat out of necessity, because I needed the cardio to pass the PT tests, and some days it was gym day, and so I'd end up on the treadmill sometimes. But I haven't run on the treadmill in years, but I had this idea that I hate treadmills, and if you know anything about the way I think, you realize that when I notice a belief like, oh, I hate treadmills, but I haven't run on a treadmill in years, that I it throws up a little red flag, and I go, well, do you really hate treadmills, or was the person that you were 7 years ago hate treadmills? Because you're a whole different person now. And I still hate treadmills. They suck so much. I went down there to the apartment gym and I hopped on the treadmill, and I like to walk at the beginning. Before I go for a run, I like to walk for a warm up. I walk a full mile. I love walking. It's like I have some of my best insights and ideas when I'm out for a walk. So part of it is the traveling around, because I have good insights when I'm driving too. But it seems like walking is better. That movement activity for the body. It's good. I don't know exactly why it works, but I do know that it works. And so I love walking. It seems like walking out and about is better than walking on a treadmill, but walking on a treadmill still is okay. And then the mile goes by and it's like, all right, it's time to start running. So, pop it up, pop the speed up, start running, get a half mile in. I'm watching TV, and I'm watching the latest Ari Shafir special on YouTube, which, by the way, if you don't get offended by jokes about religion, it's really funny. Ari Shafir. Anyways, I was watching that, but still, even with that to distract me, like a half a mile in, I was like, screw this, and I started walking. And then I start running again. I'm like, I don't want to be walking. I came here to run. It's like, well, okay, so the whole reason that I got on the treadmill in the first place is because it's raining and cold outside. Well, after that miserable, 20 minutes on the treadmill, I was like, fuck this. And I went outside and I started my little run tracker app and just ran the rest of it on the sidewalk. And it was much, much better. So, treadmills blow. So, got back from my run. Here we are. Time for the video. Um, 2 videos in a row on truth. I've been thinking back to sort of when I started really searching for truth, because I have been searching for truth my whole life, but it wasn't really the focus for a lot of time. I mean, in high school, there was more important things. In beginning in the army, I was too busy, and then like I finally got divorced and was able to spend some time alone. And really, I think like having been the middle child of a family of five children, having an older brother and sister and a younger brother and sister, shared a room most of the time growing up. In the army, always had a roommate. Like we at least we'd share a kitchen and a bathroom, if nothing else. Then married, and so that I'm alone really that much for the first time in my life, and it was kind of rough at first. And like I learned how to be in solitude and stuff, and I realized at some point that like I don't like this, like life in general. This is not going well, and I didn't know what the problem was. And so this is where my search really began, I think. And I think the first the first real step on the journey is figuring out what you want. And like when I get into a depression or whatever, I find myself like feeling adrift and like life is a little bit meaningless. Now it's I recognize that feeling fairly quickly. I go, oh, okay, so I don't know what I want, and that's the problem. Because true satisfaction, in my limited experience, seems to come from knowing what you want and moving towards it. And meaning comes from knowing what you want, and satisfaction comes from knowing what you want and moving towards it. So if you don't know what you want, life starts to feel meaningless. If you know what you want and you're not moving towards it, then life is unsatisfying. But I think an unsatisfying life is better than a meaningless life, because like if it's meaningless, you start to feel powerless and depressed. But if it's like, oh no, it means something, I'm just not happy about what it means. Like there's definitely meaning in my life, but the meaning is negative. It's like I don't like this. Like I very much know that I don't like this. That at least is an energizing emotion. Like you know what the hell you want to get away from. So so I wanted to do this video about desire, motivation, inspiration, and how to navigate life just in general. Because thinking back to the beginning of my search for truth, I think that was really the first step, was figuring out what I wanted. Little footnote, by the way, I started to say what I'm saving the treadmill for is if I am too depressed to work out. I think what I'm going to do, I my depression, when I experience it, um, dovetails with addiction, and not like really bad addiction. Um, I've always been the type of person that does what needs to be done. So as long as I like have a job that I need to go to, have things that need to be done, I will. I won't get too drunk to where I can't go to my job the next day, or I won't like watch Netflix when I'm supposed to be going to work. But if I have days off, there's a very good chance that I'm going to be drinking and just like watching Netflix all day if I'm depressed. So these things seem to tie together. And so what I decided to save the treadmill for is if I do find myself in this addiction cycle, screen addiction / depression cycle, then what I will do is I will get my ass up and I will go to the treadmill and I will watch television while I just walk on the treadmill. Because it's not bad walking on a treadmill while you're watching TV. And then it's like I can pretend like I'm not doing anything, but my body still gets some action, and it creates those better chemicals that we all know that we get if we get out of the bed and go walk. So, anyways, that's a rabbit trail, but what were you expecting? Um, where was I? Right. So when I began my search for truth, I started to realize that I didn't know what I wanted, and you need to know what you want. Yeah, absolutely. You need to know what you want. And so there's a few different things that come to mind about this. Like Alan Watts talks a lot about knowing what you want and getting what you want. And so if you're interested in this topic, I can't recommend him highly enough. He's one of my favorite philosophers. I've learned a lot by listening to his old lectures. Um, so that's enough about him. Okay, so there's what you want, there's what you don't want, and then there's inspiration. And so what you want and what you don't want sort of fall into motivation. What you don't want definitely falls into motivation. And what you do want falls into motivation, but it also falls into inspiration. And so there's also the concept of the true will, like in Aleister Crowley sort of witchcraft. They talk a lot about the true will. Um, but it's also like if you don't want to go the witchcraft route, then it's like your purpose in life, like what you're actually here for. And the reason why I bring Crowley into it is because from listening to people that practice witchcraft, I picked up the technique of learning your true will is sort of like looking at yourself the way a biologist would look at a new creature, or like an anthropologist would look at a person in an ancient civilization. What Without so much judgment, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Just sort of assume that you are, to some degree, doing what you were designed to do. Which, if you think about it, if you relax and think about it, there's pretty good odds that you're doing what you're designed to do, because it's a lot easier to do what you're designed to do than it is to do anything else. Like, if you try to take a car in the lake, it's not going to end well. And if you try to drive a boat down the street, it's going to end well, or it's not going to end well either. So it's more likely to find boats in the water and cars on the road, because that's what they're designed for. And so the odds are, if you're like you're probably not. I know this is like emotionally doesn't feel right to think, oh, I'm probably doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. No, you probably are, though. You're probably like, if you don't feel like you're supposed to be doing it, you're probably off by just like a half a degree, and you're sensitive, which is great. It's good to be sensitive. Um, just like it's good to have better vision as opposed to being legally blind, and that's not a moral judgment. It's just like, would you rather be legally blind, or whether would you rather have good vision? Well, of course you'd rather have good vision. And so would you rather be emotionally sensitive to the fact that you're not doing exactly what you're meant to do, or would you rather be numb? And there are people who have conditions where they don't feel physical pain, and they get injured all the time because the pain is there to keep you from injuring yourself, and the emotional pain is no different. So like, a lot of us have gone numb to the fact that our job treats us like a piece of machinery, and we are doing moral and emotional injury to ourselves because we're no longer sensitive to that pain. So the pain is not the problem. Yes, you want the pain to go away, but you want it to go away by fixing the thing that's causing the pain, man. You don't want the pain to go away by numbing yourself. And again, this is not judgment. I've certainly numbed myself in painful situations that I couldn't get out of. And it wasn't the wrong thing to do. Like, I needed to survive that situation, so I numbed myself. And then once I got out of it, I had to deal with the fallout from that. And then I had to, slowly but surely turn myself back on. And here we are. So, the true will. Back to the true will. One way of figuring out what your true will is just by looking at yourself and what does this creature do? I've stared at myself in the mirror. What does this monkey do? And like, okay, well, this monkey asks good questions. That's one thing that I do. Like, okay, so that's part of what I'm here for, and I do it naturally. And you could put me in prison, or you could put me in a classroom, or you could put me in a factory, or you could put me in a laboratory, or you could put me in a field, or you could put me working indoors, or you could put me work outdoors. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to ask really good questions. And you can slap me every time I open my mouth, and you can beat me for asking questions, and you might shut me up verbally, but I'm still going to ask questions in my head. So I know this. This is part of what I'm here to do. I'm here to ask the questions. It's pretty simple. Another thing that I do, in most situations, is if a situation is boring, I bring life to it. Or that's what I like to do. I like to bring life to dead situations. And at the same time, if a situation is too chaotic, I bring peace to it. So this is what I find when I observe myself. So this is part of my true will. I'm gonna give you a little fucking inside information on me. I'm here to ask good questions. I'm here to bring life to dead situations. I'm here to bring peace to situations that are overly chaotic. So you start to look at yourself and just say, well, what do I do? And it's like, okay, I fix airplanes, but is that like, what do I do when I'm not fixing airplanes? And you start to look across all. I'm not an aircraft mechanic when I'm in bed. I mean, really, like, that's my role has changed. And some people do think that they're still an aircraft mechanic, but like, or if you're it's a little easier with other jobs sometimes. Like, if your job is to be a truck driver, you're laying in bed, it's not time to be turning the wheel and shifting the gears, it's time to be sleeping. And so I guess it's not that much different. If you're an aircraft mechanic and you're laying in bed at night, it's not time to be drilling out rivets, it's time to be sleeping. You're not an aircraft mechanic, you're a sleeper at that point. So what do you do across many different roles? Everybody has different roles in your life. What do you do across these roles? And you start to ask, and I can't answer that for any of you, but if you start to ask that question of yourself, you start to see what your true will is, and that will give you one way to look at, what do I want? Because it's more than likely what you want and what you're designed to do or what you're good at are probably going to dovetail together. So one angle to look at it from is just what are you designed to do? What do you just do naturally? And you'll find some very general things out about yourself, like maybe you notice the things that are wrong. Maybe you notice, and in a specific, because everybody notices different things. So maybe you're a person that walks into the room and you see what needs to be tidied. Like, okay, so you're an organizer. Like, that's part of what you are. That's not me, man. I'm not naturally. I don't have a very critical eye. I wouldn't be a great editor necessarily. I wouldn't be a great inspector. I don't just naturally see the things that are wrong. Some people do, and that's great. There's places for that. Quality control needs people that just look at things and see what's wrong. That's not mine. There are people that just have just whatever, man. Like, I'm not here to fucking tell you about all of the different types of people. I'm here to tell you a general method. I'm here, I guess, to talk about desire and motivation and inspiration. And I want to do two things here. I want to what's the word? I want to convey the importance of understanding what you want. Otherwise, what are you going to do? You're just going to do whatever. You're going to end up going down the path of least resistance, which has probably been set up for you by people that don't have your best interest in mind. And so there are many paths of least resistance to different things, but the absolute path of least resistance is probably to your money going in someone else's pocket and you working your life away. So you have to figure out what you want so that you can figure out what you want to do, and so that you can actually like have criteria to navigate through your life. One way to look at it is through the true will aspect, and the way to figure out some of what your true will is just to pay attention to what you're already doing. Because there's a good chance that the thing that you keep doing no matter what, that's part of your true will. Okay, so there's that. Another thing that you can do is you can just write down, this is one thing that I did after listening to Alan Watts. I took a notebook and I wrote the question, what do I want? 100 times. And then every time I wanted something, I wrote it down. And then you can look through that and you can sort of start to see things that arise out of it. And of course, like 12% of it was things like steak and oranges and, whatever, like food items. Like I want something to eat. Okay, so I want food on a regular basis. Another thing that I realized is that I don't always want something. Desire, it turns out, is an emotion. And just like all other emotions, it comes and it goes. And so um, you don't always want, like, but there are desires that keep coming up, like food. That's a periodic, comes up on a fairly regular basis. And then there's things that you sort of, but like sometimes you're tired and you want to sleep, and sometimes you're bored and you want to do something active, and so it comes up. But over time, if you track your individual desires, you'll start to see this picture of what you want. It's like, oh, so I want I want these things. So that's one way. You can just write down, what do I want, and then start answering that question. You can sit with it for a while. Why don't we just know what we want? Because that seems a little bit strange. Seems a little bit mysterious. Wouldn't you just know what you want? And you do if you have clarity. But a lot of us are living in confusion. I would probably say all of us experience some confusion, and a lot of us are living in confusion a majority of the time. And part of this is because one of the best ways to get clarity is to slow down. And our life, our society seems to me to be like one of those Hot Wheels tracks with the little automatic motors that every time you go past it, it speeds you up. And like you got rent's got to get paid, so like rent's got to get paid, so I got to go to work, so you got to spend 8 hours at work, and there's deadlines at work, and it's just thing after thing after thing. It's just like going and going and going. I'm like, I never have time to stop. And you gotta stop that. You gotta stop that shit yourself. If you just let life happen to you, you're gonna be running. Life's gonna keep you running. And it's your desires actually that keep you on that wheel. If you're not paying attention and prioritizing the desires that are actually the most important to you, then the desires that are the most grabbable by them will be the things that run your life. And so you carve out some time to get clear about what you want. So one of the reasons that you don't know what you want, if you don't know what you want, is because you don't have time to stop and think. You're on the hamster wheel and you're running, just, working to pay bills so that you have somewhere to sleep when you're not at work and something to drive yourself to work with, and food to keep you, healthy enough to work. And it's just a whole self-perpetuating cycle. If you don't ever slow down and, sort of get off the wheel for a little while and figure out what you want out of life, life will grab a hold of you, and it'll figure out what you're going to do for you if you let it. So that's one reason that you might not know what you want, is because you're just moving too fast and you got to slow down. Take a break. Take some time off. Another reason why you might not know what you want is because you might be in denial about it. This happened to me. You might think that what you want is not possible, and therefore you never really allow yourself to admit, even to yourself, that you want it. Because the fact of the matter is, I want superpowers. That's one of the things that I want. I would love to be able to just walk down the roads, the back roads of this country, and do miracles. That's what I want. And so a lot of times I was unable to figure out what I wanted because that's not possible. Or at least it doesn't seem possible. Maybe one day I will do it. But I'm a little bit practical and a little bit reasonable sometimes. And so for a long time I was like, I don't know what I want, because the truth of the matter is, that's what I want. I want superpowers. And so once I finally admitted it, I was like, okay, well, you want superpowers. That's fine. What's the closest thing to that you could achieve? Like, well, if I was mega rich, then maybe I couldn't use magic to make these things happen, but I could. If I was a multimillionaire, I could absolutely just walk down the road with my debit card in my pocket, not carry any stuff with me, not own it. Like if I had a pile of money, I wouldn't have to own anything. So I could just buy it wherever I want. I could get somewhere and I could use my money to solve problems that people didn't think were solvable because they didn't think that they could ever have the money to solve it. And if that's not performing miracles in the modern world, then I don't know what it is. And so obviously I'm not a millionaire, but it was enough to relieve the tension of not knowing what I wanted to where I could move in a direction. Um, which brings me to an illustration. Before the Civil War, during the time of slavery in America, there was the North Star. The North Star still exists, obviously, and it existed much, much earlier than the foundation of America and Civil War. But it was very significant to African Americans during the time when slavery was legal in this country, because if they were trying to flee the slave states to the north, one thing that everybody knew, or was generally, part of the practice, was like you try to, get the Underground Railroad and you're trying to follow these directions and get there. But if you get messed up on this journey north trying to flee the slave states, follow the North Star. And so, like, worst case scenario, you don't make it very far, you're hiding in bushes and whatever. But if you just keep following the North Star, you're going to end up in the north eventually. This was the goal. Now, there were never, as far as I know, any slaves who got to, New York or wherever they ended up who were upset about not having made it to the North Star. They followed the North Star, they pointed themselves at the North Star, and they went towards it. Nobody ever made it to the North Star. And that was fine, because sometimes the point isn't to actually, I would say every time, the point isn't to reach your goal. Not that you should delay your goals. If it's reachable, reach it and then set a new goal. Great. But the reaching of the goal is not where the satisfaction comes from. The moving towards the goal is the thing. And so, if you want to be Jesus, great. And if you never are Jesus, that's also fine, as you just get a little bit closer. Or Buddha, whichever road walking, miracle working, robe wearing person you want to be. Like, you take your pick. But yeah, so 2 techniques. 1, observe what you already do, and that's probably part of what you want. Number 2, write the question 100 times and answer it 100 times and see if you see a pattern. And then the other thing is, one of the reasons that you might not know what you want is because you might not believe that it's possible. So say to yourself something along the lines of, I don't care if it's possible. I need to know what it is so that I can figure out what I can do that's close to it. And so if you want something that's, quote, impossible, you don't have to get it. You just have to admit it. Admit that that's what you want, and then you can move towards it. And in moving towards it, you will be happy. And so, also, when it comes to impossible things, always remember that everything that is done now was impossible until somebody did it. If you don't know the story of the 4-minute mile, look that up. Because basically, they said it was impossible. No one would ever be able to run a mile in under 4 minutes. It was just like the human body can't do it, no matter how much you train. Then somebody did it, and the next year, a bunch of people did it. Because now everybody knew it was possible. So, if you think it's impossible, everything was impossible. Everything's impossible until somebody does it. Impossible is not a real thing. So clearly define your goals, even if you think that they're impossible. Figure out what you want. I guess that's the bullet point for this whole video. Figure out what you want. So to recap the series so far, truth is the most important thing. And then once you have agreed and come into a relationship with truth, in my opinion, the next most important thing is to figure out what you want and move towards it. But what do I know? I'm a trickster and a fool.